Hello, I'm Pip, and welcome to another dungeon thing in Final Fantasy XIV. And this time we're back in the binding Coil of Bahamut, and we're fighting the automated defense system again. Yep, it's the same boss that you fight in turn 1, but this time things are slightly different. It's a much more interesting and challenging encounter. And the basic premise is that you find yourself in a maze of sectors, and each sector has a mini-boss in it, and each mini-boss has a special ability. And for every mini-boss that you kill, it removes one of those special abilities from ADS, who you fight at the end. So you can kind of choose which way you go down, choose which mini-bosses you kill, and choose which abilities ADS will have at the end of it. And I'll kind of talk you through the route that we took going down. So there are similarities between ADS in turn 1 and each of these mini-bosses and ADS at the end, in that they share some abilities. The first one that they share is the cast that you need to interrupt every single time, and it will go off every 30 seconds, and that's high voltage. And it does exactly the same as high voltage does in turn 1. If he manages to get that cast off, or any of the mini-bosses manage to get that cast off, you'll get a paralyzed debuff on the raid, which means that you'll get interrupted every couple of seconds. And that debuff lasts for 30 seconds, which means that healing for that entire time is going to be a real pain in the arse. Tanking is going to be difficult, and you're more likely to miss the next interrupt, so don't do that. And the way you get around it is basically having an interrupt rotation in the same way that you did in turn 1. And we do that through our paladins going for one, and then me going for one, and we just take it in turns all the way through. And oddly enough, when I'm recording our attempts, it doesn't actually pick up my voice from mumble, which is probably quite a good thing, because all you'd hear all the way through this is Paladin's turn, Kettle's turn, Paladin's turn, and it would probably get boring. More boring than it is anyway, probably. Anyway, so that was the first mini-boss, and he's fairly easy. He does like a thing that your melee and your tanks need to get out of, like a PB AoE, which does some damage, and all of the mini-bosses will have that, and ADS will also have that at the end. The second mini-boss here, he has Chain Lightning. So the way you deal with that is basically spread out. But if people are clumped up, it does a fair old whack of damage. So because people do end up clumped sometimes in the final fight with ADS, we chose to kill this boss and remove that from the fight.
You know they like it.
Another ability that all the mini-bosses have, and ADS also has at the end, is that he and they will apply a stacking debuff to whichever tank is tanking, and that increases the damage that they take. So you'll need to constantly tank switch, and I think our guys do it at about 4 or 5 stacks, and they'll swap aggro, and once the debuff has timed out or dropped off, they'll switch back again, and that just keeps going the whole time. So every boss has the tank debuff, every boss casts high voltage, and that needs to be interrupted, and every boss has a special ability. So we've removed Chain Lightning from ADS, and the next ability that we're going to remove from ADS is these big fire crosses that appear on the ground that are a real ball ache for melee to get out of. They're not so bad for range, and for healers it's fairly easy, but the cast time on it's really, really short, so it just seemed like a good thing to get rid of. You'll notice the disposal node here has a buff which reduces slashing damage. So that means our tanks aren't generating as much threat the whole time. So aggro, we found it here, can be pretty twitchy. So what we found the best thing to do is really just lay off the DPS and don't use any short-term buffs or anything like that, apart from Lau, who manages to yoink it nicely. Yeah. And yeah, just slowly whittle him down. Get your interrupts off, get your tank switches out, avoid the big fire cross things on the ground, and it's all good. While this is all going on, you'll notice text appearing on the screen saying that there are clicks left. That's basically a timer that starts from the very first moment you pull the first mini-boss, and that counts down, and basically a click is a minute, and once it gets down to 0, ADS will explode. I've never actually seen it happen because we've always died before that actually happened, so yeah. So, that's 3 mini-bosses down, and the next up is ADS himself, or itself, or herself. And this recording's probably about 2 weeks old now, and I thought about using more recent attempts, as one of them was a bit cleaner, but I thought this being our first kill would be a good one to put up, particularly as it's not textbook, and it kind of shows you how you have to adapt to things that happened when everything turns into a bit of a clusterfuck. Yeah. So ADS himself will have abilities of the mini bosses that you didn't kill, and it will introduce them as the fight goes on. So basically at the start it's very much like tanking another one of the mini bosses, that you'll need to do the tank switches and you'll need to get your interrupt rotation in. And he'll also do these big lines on the ground which you need to get out of, and they're kind of targeted at a party member, and one thing to note with them is that you have to move a bit further than it looks like you have to move visually on the ground. There was a few times where people have kind of thought they were well out of range and then just suddenly exploded, and much wailing and gnashing of teeth. Now the first ability that we're going to get from a mini boss that we didn't kill is called Allagan Rot, and it's the reason we have all these numbers above our heads, which will now become apparent. Allagan Rot is a debuff, here it goes, casting. It applies itself to one member of your raid.
It's on airship.
And then they have the Allagan Rot debuff, which lasts for, I think it's 15 seconds. And if you don't pass it to someone else within 15 seconds, it explodes and kills everybody in a one-shot. That's happened a few times. And the other thing to note about it is that once you've passed it and the debuff has gone to someone else, you get a 30-second debuff, which means that you can't take it again. So what you need to do is pass it through a rotation of people, and not passing it straight away. You want to leave it till there's about as small amount as you would risk on the debuff as possible before you pass it on to the next. We found that 5 second kind of worked for us. And you want to give yourself a little bit of leeway, because shit does happen and sometimes it kind of delays the pass. You'll get a beam on you, or you'll need to make an interrupt or something like that. But as you'll see, it starts off all nice and controlled, and in no way is this a DPS race. It's not. It's absolutely a control fight. So when my interrupt turn is up, for example, I'm really not all that much concentrating on putting big numbers or anything. I just want to make sure I get my interrupted, make sure that I know where Allagan Rot is, and make sure I know when I'm supposed to pick it up and when I'm supposed to drop it off. And that's basically what everyone has to do. Because the healers are so concentrated on healing, it helps if your DPS go and pick up and drop off the debuff on them. The second ability that ADS is going to start to use from a mini boss that we didn't kill are these void zones that you can see dropping around. There's one on the right hand side of the screen here. They're really easy to avoid. If you do stand in one, I think you might take some damage, but the main thing is that you get a heavy debuff, which means that you move slower, which means passing the Allegan rock can be annoying, or getting out of shit on the ground can be annoying, so just don't stand in those.
It's at 5 seconds.
And the third ability that ADS is using from a mini boss that we didn't kill is an ability called Ballast, which is like a large ground targeted AoE that the melee need to move out of. And what you can see happen here is that our Allegan rock was passed a bit early, and we made a call to have our monk come out and actually pick up the rock from another raid member to add a step into the rotation. And that's the kind of communication that you're going to need, and the kind of decisions that you're going to need to make on the fly when shit happens. And here's again, Shibi had his cooldown, which meant he couldn't take Allegan rot, so Lau had to make a run across to me. I've picked it up early. And this is the point where things start to get really hairy, as the paladins miss an interrupt, which means the healers get paralysed and can't heal, and one of our tanks drops dead. But this is the point also where if you can manage to hold it together and keep the interrupts in, manage to res anyone that dies, get that hero limit break off, which Vanders does I think, and then promptly drops dead, ADS will eventually die.
Burn.
Okay, I died. Did you get it?
Nobody has it.
Nope, nobody has it.
Somebody must have.
Burn, burn, burn.
Burn it, burn it.
Rot's on Lau.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Kill him. Yes!
Yes!
Oh my god.
That was awesome.
Yeah, and if we can kill it, anyone can. So I hope this was interesting. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.
That was brilliant.
And I just nod.